Hello from Denver, and welcome to Between the Horns, presented by your Southern California Toyota dealers with senior rider Stu Jackson, D'Marco Farr. I am JB Long.
Oh, that's Stu? I was going to say Maurice looks different.
Maurice looks good.
He does look good. Svelte.
Maurice will be with Andrew Siciliano on your TV broadcast for preseason game number 3, the Broncos and the Rams, coming up 6 o'clock Pacific on Saturday. We're hanging outside the team hotel. I have my trusty hotel pen.
Nice.
Love hotel pens. They get me through the season. D'Marco arriving in town. Stu, You've been here taking in these joint practices. Why don't you kick us off? What do you observe between the Broncos and the Rams through 2 days of practice?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, honestly, is just Matthew Stafford looking sharp and like the quarterback we all remember from 2021. He's reiterated it multiple times and said he's felt great physically several times, and it's shown with the throws he's made. The sidearms, you see all of that, being able to change the angle on, the launch point like he's always done. And so been really impressed with that, and that's certainly been a positive to see. And then also just, seeing somebody like Logan Bruss, who obviously had that lateral ankle sprain against the Raiders, being able to get some snaps this week was really huge and really important too, I would say. And also just having guys like Cooper Kupp and Darion Kendrick out there has also been really big as well. I mean, there's been a host of other things going on too, but those are really just at the top of mind as far as some of the key updates and storylines that I've been following and paying attention to.
I'm sure it got louder with DK on the field. I love the way that guy plays, and I love the way he talks too. Darion Kendrick, absolutely. The best part about him is he's good. The other part about him is he'll tell you he's good. So that's awesome. I love the confidence. And Bruss is going through it, isn't he? When little kids dream about playing in the NFL, they never talk about the injury bug and how you have to fight back from that. So yeah, we'll see how tough he is. But I wonder, with all these quarterbacks, the TV shows and the hard knocks about Aaron Rodgers and listening to the quarterbacks, is it disrespectful to put Matthew Stafford in the top 10, or should it be higher?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, his peers didn't even vote him a top 100 player in the league this year, right? I mean, that's just one thing that we could point to in terms of how everyone's suffering from recency bias. But Stu, correct me if I'm wrong, from what I saw today, even if you weren't following the football, you could tell just by the Rams' body language that the offense at least is ready for Seattle in week 1.
Absolutely. I mean, just even seeing a couple of the deep completions that Stafford had to Van Jefferson down the field, that easily 35, 40-yard gains. You look at the way that, Cam Akers and Kyron Williams were running the ball and also even making plays as pass catchers at different points throughout practice. All things that are really encouraging to see. And the offensive line is still, working through some things, obviously, as Joe Noteboom deals with, what Sean McVay has said is an undisclosed injury, and they're erring on the side of caution with him and, being smart as far as, limiting him just to individual drills for now. But overall, grand scheme of things, the offense is looking pretty good.
We'll dig into that offensive line in just a second, but I do want to point out, the local sentiment, I'm talking about those who cover the Broncos, was that the Rams dominated yesterday, and I thought they did well again today. And because the Broncos were not a good team last year, you can maybe dust that aside and say, that's not a big deal. Let's not forget, they were a great defense last year.
It's a good roster.
They were a very, very good defense. Just because the Rams put a 50-burger on them on Christmas Day does not mean they didn't have a good season. And still, this roster, I think, is very capable here in Denver on the defensive side. So I come away encouraged. I come away very encouraged.
And it could be that Sean Payton is running them into the ground and they retired. So, I mean, you don't know this early in the season what that means when you do these practices. So, I mean, it only matters when you play Denver in the preseason and then in the regular season. But, I mean, going back to Boom for a hot minute and Matthew Stafford, when you get into these arguments about how the Rams are going to be, this is a throwaway, they're tanking for a draft pick. It just drives me nuts because I keep thinking of all these passes I see Matthew Stafford making. And I know the team is young, but I'd rather have a young roster with a veteran quarterback than the other way around. So the one thing we did notice from day one, even OTAs, Matthew Stafford looks terrific. He looks like he spent the entire offseason getting ready for this. So I hope he's disrespected. I hope the offensive line stays together. I hope we find out what's ailing Joe Noteboom, because I think that was the problem last year. It wasn't Stafford dropped off, is you couldn't protect the guy.
Yeah. Okay, your bullpen is not always indicative of how you're going to pitch that day. How you play in the driving range doesn't mean you're going to go out and set a course record, but I'm telling you, if Matthew Stafford plays this season like he's played this summer, this is an NFC playoff team. I don't care what anybody thinks about this roster. I can't wait to see it live and in person in Seattle coming up on September the 10th, week 1. But to that question about the offensive line, there's been kind of another bump in the road. And I think a lot of the problems the Rams have had, problems in air quotes, have been productive, healthy, like good competitions, having two viable centers, having two viable left tackles. But if they were gravitating to Stu to putting Boom at right guard, they've not yet been able to synchronize with that configuration yet. Essentially 4 joint practices the last couple of weeks against the Raiders, now the Broncos. He hasn't been in the lineup. He's been out there, but not in the lineup.
That's right. And so because of that, that's given some more opportunities for Tremaine Ankrum to show what he can do at right guard. And, it's him being there will make a difference, because Sean McVay, when he was asked about it this week, if Joe Noteboom, when healthy, was one of their 5 best offensive linemen, he said yes. He said, that he has been outstanding as far as the way he's played at both guard and tackle when healthy. And so, when he does get to that point where he can get back out there, especially in the team drills in the live setting, that's going to make a real difference. I know, D'Marco, for you, this is something we talk about all the time as far as what difference that makes on the interior when you have guards of, say, Joe Noteboom's size or even Steve Avila's size on the interior there. I imagine for you maybe feel the same way if he's out there.
Oh,
he's
yeah.
healthy.
Well, Boom is athletic. He's got the long arms. He's a tackle, so he can get on you quick and grab onto you. So he's got that tackle athleticism. So does Tremaine Ankrum. Same thing. I mean, he's a short tackle, but he's a perfect guard if he can set himself in there. And he looks like he's doing a pretty good job. Even asked him, I said, you look pretty good at guard. Have you played this before? Nah, not really. This is new for me. I'm like, wow, it looks like you've been there a while. So that's good. But Avila was born to play guard. I mean, he's a phone booth with cleats on, and his head is made for ramming people, and it looks like he enjoys throwing people around. You haven't had that brand of nasty here in I don't know how long on the offensive line, and it really stands out on film. So I told you guys this via text. He may be the first Pro Bowl guard Sean McVay has had, because he's going to get that name recognition by going after people. And there isn't another Aaron Donald to go after, or to somebody that can, come back on him. So as long as he keeps getting reps and getting his feet wet and getting up to speed of the preseason and the regular season, he's going to be just fine in there at guard.
Did Aaron tell you that? I hope Aaron told you that.
No.
I know you got good sources on the Rams. Did Aaron say this guy's going to be the Pro Bowl guard?
I can watch, I can see, I can tell the guy isn't afraid of anybody or anything. And he's mean, and I love it. So when you see a guy that plays to the echo of the whistle and you have to back him off and he's a rookie, yeah, that guy's going places.
By the way, congratulations, Aaron and Erica, on the arrival of their new son.
Hey!
Awesome news. He's not here with the team this week, and I think all the more encouraging that the Rams performed as well as they did head-to-head against the Broncos without the player that we consider to be the best on the planet.
Can you name a kid Depoy? Can you name him Depoy, defensive player of the year, Depoy?
No, I like it.
Go ahead.
Middle name, maybe.
Yeah.
But look, as we do get within 2 weeks shortly of the opener, I understand the consternation about, okay, if you're going to put Noteboom in at a position that he's not specialized in previously, how much does he need to play at full speed to be comfortable going up against the Seahawks in that configuration? Hypothetically, let's just say that it is Ankrum starting week 1 at right guard. Maybe the optics aren't what you would hope because of the contract and the money that Noteboom is making, the fact that you drafted him, but is it the worst thing to have him waiting in the wings, either interior or at the tackle position?
Oh, it's too late.
Joe Noteboom?
Yeah, it's too late. If he's got to rotate to the bench because you've got other players that are better, then so be it. You'll take that up in the offseason. Whoever decided to, pay him that, you're going to have to answer for that. But if you've got 2 better players or 3 better guys or 4 better guys than him, or if he can't stay healthy,
or just a group of 5 that you're more comfortable with, more synchronized,
then you got to go. And look, if something goes wrong and you got to bring him in,
that's what I'm saying.
That's
how you start is not how you finish.
Absolutely.
Last year taught us that more than anything, right?
No doubt. I mean, look, you need a healthy 5, and if you can keep all 5 together, that used to be the hallmark of this football team.
Yes.
If you can get back to that, then you'll start having success again.
17 season where they started the same 5 throughout the year, except for the final game when they got to rest starters. All right, since we broke training camp in UC Irvine, I think there have been some names that have emerged, right? Through 2 preseason games, 4 joint practices, 2 against the Raiders, 2 now against the Broncos. When the lights come on, sometimes gamers stand out. So I'm curious from your standpoint, gentlemen, whose stature's been elevated since we broke camp in Irvine?
Perhaps it might be, for me, the easy choice because it's arguably the most visible position of any on the field, but I'm going with Stetson Bennett at quarterback just because – we saw him, troubleshooting and problem solving and working through, going through NFL reps and going against NFL speed for the first time in training camp. But then when you see him get out there in the preseason games and even here in some of these joint practice settings, he's really doing a good job of bouncing back from mistakes. He'll be the first to admit, especially in each of the last 2 games, that, there are some plays that, I know for a fact that he said after the Raiders game that there were some boneheaded plays that he made and basically got away with. But when he has made those plays, he's found a way to respond to that adversity by either leading a touchdown scoring drive against the Raiders, where he ended it with a 4-yard touchdown run, or against the Chargers, just the way he was able to bounce back after some of those early pass attempts. And again, he's also shown that here when we've watched him in these joint practices against the Broncos and the Raiders. And so to me, again, it's one thing when you're in the practice setting, but for him to be able to show that that ability to handle adversity in real time and in a live game setting is something that's encouraging, I think, if you're a rookie quarterback.
Let me follow up on that. I'm jumping ahead a bit in terms of what we're going to look for in the coming days between now and when rosters have to be finalized, the initial 53-man on Tuesday. But are you saying that you're now comfortable saying Stetson Bennett is Matthew Stafford's backup, and if the Rams do choose to move forward with 2 quarterbacks, he can be that guy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Stu.
No, you're good. I wholeheartedly agree. Barring some unforeseen change or circumstance, I think that's very much what you're looking at now. I think, at this point, it's a situation where you would rather go through those growing pains, if you will, and let him kind of learn through that as he has through these preseason games and joint practices, rather than maybe have him sit and wait and not put him out there and have him, risk, facing those mistakes.
Why do you say yes? Is that more about him or more about the alternatives?
Well, I think all his mistakes are coachable, and man, he's fun to watch. He gets out of danger. I like quarterbacks that are mobile, and it's not too big for him. You've talked to the guy. You've seen him in press conferences. That SEC education has really, did him well, did him a solid. So the NFL is not so scary for him, and he has presence of all the backups that have come through here. I mean, I think he's got the best presence of all of them. The guy that stands out the most, like this guy could actually be a starter, a guy that you can build around at some point. But the thing that stands out the most is in a professional football game, Sean McVay is going to do the best to call the best play to put the team in successful situations. But defense are going to do that too. And when it breaks down, then what happens? So watching him move around and scramble to throw or scramble to make a play, his decision-making in that situation in game situations has been, outstanding in the preseason. So to me, yeah, it's clear that is your number 2 guy.
Who else has stepped up through 2 preseason games and 2 weeks of joint practices for you?
Well, it's the easy one. It's Trey Tomlinson. I mean, look, every time he's on the field, practice or games, he makes something happen, and they keep coming after him because he's not very tall. I'm sure everybody in the box or that's down there with binoculars saying, hey, take a shot at number 6. He's only 5'8". Good luck with that. I love how he keeps his body in position to make plays. He's a smaller guy. These receivers are going to try to jump on him and lay on him to keep him on the ground. He runs around and makes plays. He comes up on the run. He was a little bit low, but I love his aggression there. So, yeah, he's a guy that you would think because of his size, you have him slotted in as a slot corner. Look out. This guy can play outside the numbers, too.
Let me stay in the secondary. Quentin Lake, I think, was already in great standing. We already foresaw a role for him on the game day roster for the 23 Rams. But these last couple of weeks, he's seemingly taken a step forward. I don't know if it has to do with John Johnson III's arrival, but especially last week against the Raiders. My goodness, on special teams, he popped.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look, I said this before, and I'll say it on. I know Ben Skoranek, I think, might be in line to be the personal protector on the punt team, which is great for Ben. He's a receiver. He's a fullback. He can be your PP. Ben Skoranek is a tough guy, but I think that has to be a defensive player if you want to go down and cover kicks, and it's got to be Quentin Lake. He's a safety. He hunts down balls and tackles for a living. This is what you need, especially with a rookie punter, with a guy with a big leg like that. So I hope that he can develop into a top-flight safety and a top-flight special teams player at the same time.
A couple more. The fact that Byron Young did not have to play last week, to me, is a good sign in terms of where he stands on the depth chart on the edge. And then Tyler Johnson, I think, probably a bubble candidate for me leaving training camp, but based on how he's performed largely with backup quarterbacks through 2 weeks of preseason, boy, it'd be a shame to see him get out of this facility, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he's been a reliable target, especially for Stetson Bennett when they've done, some of the team drills and even some of the 7-on-7 drills and joint practices. And even in the preseason. I mean, he had like 5 catches for 70 yards in the first preseason game, and a lot of that was because of the rapport and timing with Stetson. He's one of those guys that, there were a few free agent signings this summer that, maybe people didn't know, okay, like what can we expect, kind of under the radar, if you will. And he's someone who I would kind of put into that group who has maybe faced that label or had that label, but now has exceeded expectations, if you will, and put himself in position to, be a meaningful part of that receiver rotation.
And before we started, I read your 10 observations from practice today, and I think you're right to point out that Cam Akers has looked great and Kyron Williams, once again, sensational. But don't lose sight of Ronnie Rivers. He looks like a rostered running back to me with the way that he's played this preseason.
He's tough, man. Tough and compact. I like it. He gets straight to the point. Not quick, not fast, but he's all of a sudden right up the gap. So absolutely, that's going to be a tough deal. I mean, I remember, when I was a rookie, they sat us down in a room, me and Mark Boutte, and they said, look, I can't make the decision. You're going to make it for us. Whoever plays the best stays. And I went out and versus San Diego and went nuts. I hope they have the same situation for running backs. Whoever plays the best in your reps, whatever reps you get, will stay on this roster. Let's see how bad they compete.
All right, so let's go to the next 48, 72 hours, depending on when you're watching this. Between now and then, the Rams are going to have some decisions to make, those that they haven't made already. Certainly Saturday's participation will play into that for the final few roster spots. But as we get into roster cuts, and this year there's just one wave, down to the 53 on Tuesday. What are some things to look out for? What tea leaves will you be reading?
I think we were just talking about Tyler Johnson and the wide receivers. For me, it's that position. I mean, without speaking for, Sean McVay or the front office or whoever, like, to me, just from what I've seen, that's going to be one of your toughest decisions to make as far as how many you keep, because I think you could make an argument for 6, you can make an argument for 7. I'm just really fascinated to see what they do with that position, or what that position group looks like, come, the day of the 53-man roster deadline, because all of those guys, I think, have had a solid camp when they've been available, and will make it really tough, I think, on Les and company.
I think you can make the case for 7 at receiver, and I probably would, for a lot of reasons, including you play a lot of them, right? That is your featured position. Mm-hmm. I think there are kicking game roles for some of them, like if you want to make Ben Skoranek like your hybrid fullback, tight end, specialist, and 6th or 7th receiver, great. Maybe for Tyler Johnson or Demarcus Robinson, there's a return role to be had, something like that, where you can justify, hey, we could see this player being active on game day with a helmet, and therefore we're going to go heavy at this position.
Wow. How many quarterbacks you keeping? 2, 3? You got to go light somewhere.
I think I would go light at that position.
Tight end?
To go heavy at tight end if necessary.
I like 3. I like 3 tight ends, don't you?
Well, I think injury designation is something that I will certainly be watching between now and the weekend and Tuesday, in terms of O'Shawn Mathis, who, I mean, looks like a future edge rusher. Like, you can't wait to see that guy get in pads. But we haven't seen him in that regard yet. And where his health stands relative to some of those thresholds where you decide what roster designation makes sense, similarly for Hunter Long. Based on what Davis Allen did in preseason game number 2, like, it'd be hard to, I think, dethrone him right now as your tight end 3. So what do you do with those 2 players in terms of how they start the year to make sure that no other team gets a chance to put them on their roster?
Look, one of you guys is going to have to cover. If you're going to keep them, one of you guys is going to have to play special teams and really, really maximize that. That's going to be your job until you get on the field as a tight end or somewhere else. But it just depends. Where you go heavy, you're going to have to take from. And I don't think you can take from the O-line. You're going to need every guy you can get. So,
and you also don't want to take from the secondary.
No. I think every one of those guys, with the exception of a few, and I heard this from their coaches, you have to trust the technique, and they're watching. If you don't do the technique and you get beat, that's bad. If you do the technique and you get beat physically, that's one thing. But it's going to be hard to cut some of those guys. And to keep who? Not for a guy that can only do one thing and just play receiver. I mean, some of these guys are going to have to, like, work in the mailroom of playing special teams and play it well to stay.
Also, don't be afraid of the practice squad. Like, when you draft 14 rookies and then you add 20 plus more in college free agency, you know that there aren't going to be enough roster spots for all of these projects. But the good news is, if the rest of the league doesn't think much of your chances this year, thinks that you don't have the strongest roster, then yeah, good for you in terms of, I think there's a higher percentage chance that some of the players you do have to release can make it back to your practice squad and by October, November, December might have a chance of helping you win some games. That's especially true on special teams. And D'Marco, I know you wanted to finish there with what you've seen, especially from the punting unit so far.
Yeah.
Going into week 1 in Seattle.
Well, young roster. I know with young teams, there's going to be some young moments, and every game is going to be tough and tight, but not impossible to win. And I would hate that if you've got a game in hand and you blow it because you miss a kick or you outkick your coverage and it gets returned. That would just be terrible. So if your young punter can learn to dial it in, and if he can't, then angle kick, punt it out of bounds. Just make sure you don't hurt the defense, hurt the football team. Place kicking, look, you got one job, and I like place kickers. Some of those guys are my best friends, but you got one job. You got to bang it through the uprights. If not, then guess what? There's going to be 5 guys lining up for your job the next day. That's the way it is. So teams has got to improve, and that's going from last season to this season, but it's definitely have to improve from what we've seen this preseason so far.
Yeah, between now and when we speak again next week after that initial 53-man roster is made, a lot of tough decisions. But what I find interesting is the front office is going to have to thread a pretty fine needle here in terms of you do have some waiver wire priority this year, right, which is new for the Sean McVay Rams, where someone you might be interested in comes available because all 32 teams are dealing with this reality. But you have to counter that with the financial reality that the Rams find themselves in this year, right? And then also not wanting to stunt the growth of some of these players who have had their moments this offseason, and you would really like to keep to develop with your coaching staff with whom they've already developed a rapport and learned some of your system. All right, a lot of unknowns, including the final preseason game against the Broncos from here in Denver on Saturday night. Hope you'll join us either on the TV or radio side. Stu, D'Marco, and I will be back with a whole lot more coverage next week, a loaded week. It is that gap week between the preseason and the opener in Seattle, but a whole lot to report on and to discuss as your 2023 Rams roster is formulated. All right, we'll stop there from Denver. As always, Between the Horns is presented by your Southern California Toyota dealer. Enjoy preseason game number 3 and the rest of your weekend.